Ben, hello.
What's up, Brad? How are you?
I'm doing great. I only have two questions that for this entire show. That's the only structure of the show. The first question and the last question. What has you waking up excited?
A lot of things, honestly. I like the first thing that came to my mind. I was doing a bunch of work stuff yesterday. In between calls, I was in my kitchen and I was making my favorite soup. I made this incredible ham and bean soup that is just like one of my favorite things. And it's been like cold and wet here in Ohio. So I just felt like the right time. And so I woke up this morning and I was like, I can't wait for lunch.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Where did the recipe come from? Like, is this like something that is like stumbled onto it, or is this like a deeper thing?
Not a ton of depth here. My partner Megan is a really good cook, and I took a few cues from her approach to soups, and so it's nothing fancy. It just tastes really good.
Amazing. That's great.
Yeah, that's one of many things. I've been doing a lot of reading around just like how to be happy in life, and this transitional moment I think comes to a lot of folks, about my age with a little gray in their beards. And I think you start to think about your sort of value in the world and like how do you like what do you want to be remembered for and what do you want to be known for? And I think I'm learning a lot about myself as somebody who just wants to connect people. I just want people to
Mm.
like the I have so many amazing folks in my life, in work and in my in my social circles and my family, all of it, and to just like see them connected in interesting ways. And that's sort of where my head has been lately, and that's led to all kinds of interesting things for the last couple of years. So
Yeah. So it's like because you, for as long as I've known you, you've always been connecting people, but it sounds like it's emerged as more of this is my mission.
yeah, I think I've known that I liked to do that, but I think I was always sort of, I don't know, it was always secondary to what I was doing. So I don't know if I would say it's definitely not the only thing I'm working on these days. I mean, I still have my consultancy and studio and all that, but it's taking up more of my mental space. And I think
Hmm.
I'm working hard to find ways to do that between the things that I'm doing, to sort of earn a living. Yeah, I'm finding it so rewarding. It's just, I don't know. It's just the little conversations here and there, and you pick and you sense a pattern. Oh my gosh, I talked to two people who both studied architecture and now they're in design systems. Those two people should talk to each other. So it's just a
Yeah.
little connection. It's that just like little stuff like that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You're describing something that I'm going through right now as well, where there are these things that are these kind of almost secondary activities to the things that we do to earn a living or to make money that end up being the real mission, right? Like it's like, oh yeah, like I really like web design. I really like making websites. And like, oh, I got this opportunity to like talk about it in this place or share or teach in some way. And that was nice. And that was fun. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming of making websites. And whenever you flip that and you're like, oh, the reason why, oh, okay. Like, and you start directing your attention more at the deeper why, that's a really wild place to be.
It is. The word I keep using is rewarding. I think it's like I keep coming away from those interactions just like feeling a little bit overwhelmed with gratitude. It's like, and that does that. I mean, I love making stuff on the web, as you know. Like you and I have both been doing this for a long time, and
Yeah.
and I still get. And I saw you post recently on LinkedIn. I like to make websites or something like that, and I was like, yes, I do. And I'm doing that still in my own space, for my own stuff, and I
Sure.
love it. It's not quite the same. It's just not as I don't know how else to explain it. And part of that for me, I think, has been not only the sort of connecting in the way that I was describing earlier, but also like with the intent or with like it sort of like soaked in curiosity,
Mm.
like learning through the connection. And so the most tangible example I have of this is like we started doing these surveys a long time ago around design systems, and at Sparkbox we did a bunch of those. Part of what was really cool about that is that we asked him one question at the end of all of those that was, is it okay if we reach out to you to talk if we have like further questions? Like you said something interesting and we want to dig in. And everybody would say, of course, it's totally okay. And so then I had this group of people who were like, they cared about something I cared about professionally, and they just gave me permission to let's have a conversation, you know? And so it started me down this path of, you know, just like digging in and talking to so many people in the same space, hearing the stories of like sort of like wild origin stories of folks in our space who come to it from everything from like music to biology to writing. And like, it's incredible, you know? And so all of that just kept growing and evolving, turned into this sort of collaborative learning thing that I'm trying to do. And that's, you know, the question I think you've been on, Brad, as a co-host, where we just ask the community something and then we dig into it together, you know? And it takes so much of the pretense away from the industry where it's like, I go to an event and all these people are up on this stage. They must be so good at this or experts or whatever. When in reality, the reality has always been, Brad, that like, you know, you're very good at this, but so are so many of those people sitting in those seats who have paid money to come and hear you, you know? I feel that, you know, so it's like, I love it in that way. And those people have become such strong connections for me now, you know? And so I think it's all sort of like folding into itself in weird ways, you know?
That's beautiful. What's interesting is that not necessarily you're head and shoulders above anyone else from a brass tacks. It's like when you realize that your ability to make those connections and to cultivate the community, that's the talent, and not everyone actually is wired for that, right? And that's
true.
That's I think like a really cool thing is like you see a power differential, and you're using your power and your influence and your energy to equalize that and to do it in a way that is curiosity led, humility led, community led. Like that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Brad, that's such an interesting, I've never thought about it like that, like the power dynamic side to it. You know, that's like, I need to process that.
You're an amazing facilitator. And I think that's what like amazing facilitators do is that, you know, and I'll admit that I'm quite bad at it just because I'm very talkative, where I have a hard time, you know, just like hitting pause and creating space. Like you're more like chill. I think you just kind of naturally create like the space for other people to do. But your framing for everything has always been the way of kind of getting a conversation going. You're helping people feel psychologically safe. You are sort of, again, sort of picking at things with like a curiosity, you know, that you're just describing. And when people are in those positions, and they're not in those positions often, right? I think that's important to say. So the fact that you're able to design a conversation, or now even more in more of a formal capacity, design like an actual environment or an actual place for people to have those kinds of conversations. Really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. That's a nice sort of way of viewing it, Brad. I love that. And it makes me feel even more sort of like responsibility for the work, you know, like when it's framed in that way of like, you know, balancing the powers and, you know, sort of creating more spaces that are actually safe and equitable and all that, you know?
Yeah.
And especially in our culture, you know, with things that are being dismantled even as we speak right now, you know? So to sort of stand for that, I think is really, really important.
Let's talk about that further, because I think that that's like one of the biggest drivers of why I felt compelled to make something like this. What's playing out in the world right now, safe to say it's not healthy. Even the people who are like, you know, rooting for it, it's like, I don't think anybody's like, oh yeah, like everything's totally fine and whatever. There's this interesting thing that I've been picking at for a while, and is a big driver for this show altogether, is that there are people I see out there that are doing the types of things that you are doing, and that I think a lot of the other guests are doing, which is despite all of this, there's an urgency and a mission to counter that, not by countering it directly, but by moving forward with love and positivity and optimism and hope and in cultivating those things.
I think it's interesting because I haven't thought of it as like an act of resistance. Like I've been moving down this path for years. I can look now and see that. So even before some of the more current stuff has been happening politically here in the States, I think I was moving on this path. But I will say that a lot of the feedback that I've gotten from folks, like through the question or for some of the other little things that I've tried to facilitate in that capacity it is interesting because it's everybody acknowledges that they're learning a ton. Their perspective is being broadened on the subjects that we're discussing and all of that. They talk about how their careers, they're in a much better place from their careers, like all kinds of really good stuff, But the thing that is consistent is that the space feels like a place where they belong, And I think that's like so simple, but it's missing from so much of our industry in our lives, And so I think that's what has really driven it for me. It's like hearing that kind of thing is like, okay, I feel like I got lucky early on, just sort of like lucked into creating a space that was, people felt comfortable in. But now how can I be more intentional with that? How can I like take that, what's worked, what's not, adjust, iterate, move through it, So I'm reading this book now. Actually, Aaron Irizani recommended it to me. It's called Get Together. It's on building community. Have you read this or something you're familiar with? Okay. No. It's on building community. And like one of the things they talk about in there is that you don't, like a lot of people try to start communities in some way by creating the community. And this book is all about like, actually, no, you have to like let go a little bit. You have to let the community create itself. And so that's not quite how they say it, but that's essentially the gist of it, And I think that's interesting for me as like a business person, who's like lived 16 plus years of running companies, trying to like create something of value there, to sort of like move into this model where it's very different and it's kind of like hands off a little bit. And it's just like, get the right people in the right space and to let it emerge. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
you're in the process, I think, of writing or wrapping up a book. People are like, oh, like, how do you figure out what to write about? It's like the way for these things to happen from the ground up. You don't go, oh, I'm going to write about that, and then like go from scratch and then like, because that's hollow, it's inorganic, right? So it's like it's the organic growth of things. You're not trying to like have you and your ego center stage or to create this rigid boundary and put people inside of it, but rather to just kind of say, here's a cool thing, show up and you'll probably have a good time.
Yeah.
You'll probably be better for it.
Yeah. This is so interesting. Brad, when I first started my first company, it was called Forge. This is like a precursor to Sparkbox. I remember sitting down with my partners at the time and we were like, okay, it's a company and companies have missions, visions, and values. So, I think in about 2 or 3 hours, we came up with all of those and we wrote them out in a little Google Doc. And then we kind of it just sort of disappeared and we just went on about our days. And I remember thinking like, I know we have to have these things, but I think at that time, I just wasn't mature enough to understand like why they actually mattered or how they would play out in any way. But I would say one of the things I've learned over the last, over the decade and a half, 2 decades of doing that work is values actually really matter. And most people don't even know what their own values are, And so like understanding what you personally believe, I think matters. And for me, I've thought about that a lot. And so the communities that I'm trying to create, the spaces I'm trying to create, they all have that in common, which is it's me sort of like saying like in a more public way, these are the things I believe.
Yeah.
And if you believe those things, come jump in, And what
Yeah.
that does is it like, it has that sort of polarizing effect where it's like, okay, I don't believe that. I'm not going to that meeting, or holy crap, I've been looking for someone else who believes that. Let me be a part of that. And now there's like an
Yes.
eagerness and there's sort of like the values are the constraint in some way, Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah.
No, 100%. You again, just like you're creating the vessel that like the values are are your boundaries, and
Yeah.
people that don't agree with that aren't going to like cross that threshold.
Yeah.
Have you done like exercises or things around your like kind of personal values, or what things have you found to be helpful for
Yeah.
picking?
Yeah. I just have my own little process that I use. I do this maybe once a year, sometimes twice if there's like a big change in life. But I do this little exercise where I basically go back through my life. I look back historically at my life. Because here's the thing I learned about values is like, it's one thing to like say stuff. It's another thing to make decisions. And I think values, especially in the organizational context, they rear their heads when things get hard. And
Yes.
you can see, do the things that they're deciding as leadership align with the things they've been saying all along? And when
Yeah.
those things don't align, that's where people feel unsafe.
Yep.
So for me, like thinking about that, I just look back at my life and I'll say like, okay, I know I made a huge decision here. I made this choice. What was happening in my life? Why did I make that choice? What are the things that I believed at that time that sort of led me to make that big decision? And so this is sort of like an aggregate, exercise where when I make a big decision, I can kind of look at that now and be like, why? Okay, stepping away from that, 30,000 foot view. Why did I make that choice? What are the things that I believe now that sort of led me to that path? So that's sort of
Yes.
how I kind of manage this myself. And I have a small coaching practice where I'm working with folks, and a lot of it starts with this because most people just they don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they just haven't taken the time to do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when we do that, it's like you get this like X-ray goggles into the life of somebody. You can sort
Yeah.
of see so much, and it helps people to understand why they enjoy the things they enjoy, why they choose to do the things they do, why they leave the jobs they leave, all of that. It sort of exposes it. I've gone through that exercise as well for some of the community spaces that I'm trying to create. And there's a few of these like values that always rise to the surface for me. One of those is stay in learning mode. This is like such a simple thing to me. And you do this wonderfully, Brad. Every time I talk to you, I can tell you're just like thirsty for more. You're like,
Yeah.
insatiably curious. And I feel like that for me, if I just imagine like if our industry could sort of reset, we could go back to sort of the beginning of the days when we were just kind of getting the internet going. And if we, instead of sort of like approaching it with like, let me teach you the things I've learned, let's approach it with like, hey, maybe you've got something for me to learn, like
Yeah.
every interaction. If it was always that, can you just imagine how much healthier it would feel,
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's like a really foundational thing for me. And I try to take that into every conversation I have with apprentices, interns, with, executives and clients, all of it. It's just like, what can I learn from you?
The HVAC person that
Yeah.
shows up to your house, like that's my favorite, is
I
like
love it.
whenever there's just like, oh yeah, you're just here and you're up on my roof fixing my gutter. What you got, man? And
Yeah.
I'm like, bring it on. Like, tell me everything. Tell me the crazy shit.
Yeah.
Tell me like what you've learned in 30 years of doing this. Like,
Right. Dude. And I feel like as people who, you and I both, who are passionate about design systems, like one of the muscles that you have to develop as a systems practitioner is connecting the dots between things, right? Like when I change this, what happens, right? Like the sort of like field of interactions that all happen and come from like cause and, all that stuff, right? So I think this exercise of being curious and like sort of the gutter guy, right, who's on your roof fixing stuff, the things that this person has learned in their 30 years of doing this, there's a way to apply that to what you're doing in whatever field you're in, you know? And as systems people, I think it's our job to exercise that muscle of like, how do I draw a connection from that? What can I do? What can I take from this that applies in my space, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that's like a really fun way to sort of like take those scenarios. And if you're in the mode of thinking where you have to sort of also bring it back to work, there's always a way to do that, you know? It's
Yeah,
fun.
you can turn that on. Increasingly, I'll just, share just life stuff or whatever. And of course, just by way of the vessel that we're in, and that is LinkedIn, all these people, connecting it to, and here's how you
Yeah.
apply that to, and I'm like, I get it. Like, I get it. And there are lessons to be learned, and like that's good sometimes, but I do feel like everything has turned into that. So I've been
Mm.
kind of like actively fighting that stuff where it's just
Yeah.
like, have hobbies, enjoy them, not to make yourself a better worker, not to do whatever, but like because that is what a good and healthy life is.
Yeah.
It's like it's the things have become very, very kind of transactional, or like, how can
Mm.
I utilize this thing? But there is just this like kind of coming back to, I think, what you've been picking at, and like kind of, I feel like the arc of this conversation here, you've been chipping away at all the layers, like starting with, okay, like here's technology, here's this like web stuff that we do. And if you just kind of keep drilling, you end up with a bunch of sentient beings floating on a rock that all have hopes, fears, dreams, qualities, tendencies, the duality of man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what do we do with that? And what do we
Y-
do with that?
Yeah. And it's like on one side, you know, there's the person like I was describing who's taking the lessons from the conversation with the gutter guy and applying them in work and with their kids and whatever else. And then there's the severance side, you know, the other end of that, where it's like an absolute wall of between, you know. And I know that you're not that far onto that spectrum, right? Like the things you're learning in life, you do apply in your work. I see you do it, you know,
Yep.
and vice
Yep.
versa. So like, what's the right balance? Like, how do you, where is it on that spectrum that you are trying to be?
Yeah. I think that increasingly, and I think that I'm hearing you sort of pick at it too, where it's basically like, if you're able to design your life in a way that you are able to exercise your full self and live your life without any form of severance. That's not to say like I'm going to take all of my hobbies and smush them into one ball, but I think that what I've been doing a lot of work on has been actively rejecting, oh, I do this, which means I don't do these other things. Once you sort of free yourself from these kind of artificial boxes, and just kind of give yourself permission to travel to where your instincts and values take you,
Yeah.
you could end up in all sorts of things. And there's a dude at the Whole Foods, the overseer of the self checkout sort of
Okay.
lane, right? So it's
Yeah.
like
I
one
know this
one
guy. Yeah.
one dude, right.
Yeah.
But this dude is different because he is playing a djembe, like he is playing a hand drum at the Whole Foods. He's got like the green vest on and everything. And this dude is like, I I can't remember what country he was from originally, but is somewhere in like West Africa.
Yeah.
And he plays the djembe. And so everybody's in line. And so, of course, I have to talk to this guy. Right.
Yeah.
But like, I love that. Like that makes me
Mhm.
so happy, because it's like, it's one of those things where he is bringing joy to the many people getting corralled through his little lane,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not hurting anything, far from it, it's quite
Yeah.
the opposite. And I think that there's just so many more opportunities for people to be able to do that, whether it's like a white collar thing or an office thing or a virtual thing or just casual interaction moving through life. And that's the kind of shit that turns me
Yeah,
on.
I love that. That is something I've seen you kind of embody in the world, like just sort of being very vocal about these other things that you love, as much as you love the web,
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I wonder how much of that is actual for people and how much of that is sort of intentional in terms of like who they present to the world. There's a gentleman who does a podcast now. Guy Siegel is his name, Guy, and he
Yeah.
runs,
Yeah.
and and he does this amazing. I don't know if you've been on there. I was on in season 1, and he was just like design downtime. He's like, tell
Yeah.
me something that's not at all about design, or about the
Yeah.
web or
Yeah.
whatever. And I love this because it is exposing to me just how deep down the rabbit hole so many other people go just like me into these wild, exciting hobbies and stuff. We need more of that, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
great example maybe of us
Yeah.
doing that.
That stuff is that humanizing force. And I feel like at this very like increasingly kind of like cold and clinical world. And I think that like one of the interesting things and maybe like themes that's kind of emerging here, and one thing that we didn't put on the table quite yet, but the backdrop, I think, to all of this, right? With COVID happening within these last 5 years, I feel like we need to be reminded that humanity exists. We have gotten used to talking to people in boxes. You know this, like for like client travel and stuff. We used to do that shit all the time.
All the time.
And so
Yeah.
you'd have your meetings, but then what would you do? You go out for a beer or you go
That's
out
right.
for a meal, right?
Yep.
And it's like, fuck, we lost that. Like we
Yeah.
lost that in a big way. And so I do feel like the work that you're doing, giving people that pulse back, and that's very necessary and very needed right now.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it's easy to forget it. I literally moments before we jumped on was the sort of like all Redwoods call for this community. And it was the first one. This is our first week sort of being sort of officially open. And so we wrapped up this call, and it went well. It's always like the first call is always like, "Oh, I don't know these people." There's a little bit of awkwardness, but it was great. And I have a small group of people called the Redwood Rangers, who are like folks that are like helping kind of facilitate and just like being present and modeling those values and all that. And right away in the Ranger channel in Discord where we were hanging out, somebody was like, that was great, but it feels like we need more like just space for people just to like chat and hang out.
Yeah.
And it's so true because I look back at that meeting now just an hour ago, and I was like, all business. I was like, I got to share all these things and like all this stuff. We got to talk about the admin stuff, the tools and all of it. And I was just, like even me, somebody who's like, I love this stuff, it just was out the door, So it's a really good reminder, to like let people just be people,
Yeah. But and what that translates to is we have to spend more time with people.
Right.
And that's something that, we both do a lot of work around collaboration and harp about that and stuff. That's how those things tend to go, where it's just like, okay, we got 45 minutes. Like, we got to like make some calls. We got to come to these decisions. And when you think about, some of the most collaborative experiences you've had, it's when you are together with each other for a few days or longer. Like, I think about like my college band, right? We're all like living together. So it's just like, there's plenty of space to just kind of be just humans around each other. And then like, eventually you write some songs or you produce some stuff and you make some stuff. And it's like, that everything has been put into these boxes like that. Yeah. But rejecting boxes has been like such a freaking theme of like my life. It's like, you see, I mean, the Gantt charts, right? The Gantt charts, the ticket boards, all the stuff. It's like, this shit's supposed to be creative work,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. So it's like
Yeah.
rejecting boxes like across the board.
You're right. This is like a topic, and like in our specific industry, it rears its head with like designer developer handoff. This just like always comes up. It's like for 2 decades I've been hearing people complain about it. And we get a new tool, and it's like, oh, this is going to fix it, and of course the tool doesn't fix it, right? It's
No.
like you just put these two people in a room, let them figure it out.
Yes.
Like it's not. I mean, I don't understand why it's so hard. Just put them together, let them figure it out. That's how it happens. And it's hard. I think the challenge, of course, is like business is about scale, and so it's like, how do we do that when we have 500 designers and 1,500 developers or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, whatever. I don't know.
I think that the real human work you're doing and reminding people of, and sort of creating these outlets and these opportunities for people to connect, they will go back into their box filled worlds
Yeah.
with a greater appreciation of that stuff, right? That if you are able to
Yeah.
all get together, if they walk away from that going, oh, that was good. That felt good. That was a positive thing. That was healthy. That was whatever.
Yeah.
They're now inspired to say, okay, well, maybe I do that rather than our next boring ass stand up or whatever.
Yeah.
Like maybe we at least just put some form of pulse into it. And whenever you like reframe it, where it's like, here's this person, this living being that has emotions, that has, hobbies, that has interests, that has like perspectives, that has all of these things, it you operate fundamentally differently, right?
Yeah.
But there's been this flattening. The corollaries between the AI conversation and the political conversation has been, I've been like coming back to that again and again. We are not giving ourselves nearly enough credit or seeing ourselves for the multidimensional and valuable
Yeah.
creatures we are. Like not just
Yeah.
ourselves, not just our community, not just our tribe,
Yeah.
everyone writ large.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think there's a pendulum that swings at least in sort of like the business world around this. It's like we go through seasons where the sort of in way to run a company is we get to know each other, we hang out, it's like chill, and I know all these people, I know their families, I know their kiddos, and now we can do better work together, which is 100% true because I know these people. That comes with its own set of challenges. But the other side of the spectrum is no, 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 no. We are not your family. You come here, you check in, you do your work, you go home. And there's like a weird health to that too, which is like,
Yeah.
like this isn't my family. And I do have a whole community of people home waiting for me to be there to sort of interact with and pour into and grow from. I feel this is a pendulum. It's gone back and forth 2 or 3 times since I've had a company.
Yeah.
And each side presents really hard challenges, and it's hard to keep the pendulum from swinging so far that it reaches the unhealthy edge. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yep.
It's like, I don't know. So I'm not sure how we sort of create the right balance,
It's the values because
Yeah.
it's the values of we're all family here, and you use that to manipulate people and guilt them into spending
Right.
time with people, and the people that have to go pick up their kids are suddenly like at
Yeah.
a loss. Like that's it. So it's like it has to be born from that. Like we're doing these types of things so that we can create a healthier environment, create
Yeah.
community, create like all of the values that you express. And same goes with the other end of
Yeah.
the spectrum, where it's just like, oh yeah, it is healthy for you to spend more time with your family, and we are not
Right.
trying to hold you hostage here.
Yeah. That's it, man.
How have your priorities changed? And just like when you kicked off the conversation here, it's sort of like starting to like take that kind of, you're at this moment of talking about more like legacy stuff and
Yeah.
more like this season of life is not necessarily that bright-eyed and bushy-tailed thing, but there's also I'm hearing like a lot of like enthusiasm for this chapter. So how are you like thinking about this chapter for you?
I think changes in somebody's trajectory. You use the word trajectory. You've been on this trajectory, you said, and I think I have been, and in some respects, I think I kind of, for 12 years of the last 16, kind of just had my head down, and just like doing the things I knew I needed to do to keep that trajectory,
Yep.
in the right direction.
Yep.
And I think like hard things happen in your life and it sort of forces you out of that zombie mode, of just
Mhm.
one foot in front of the other. And I know this, and those experiences, I think, sort of shock you into like observation around you and like questioning,
Mhm.
and I think that's sort of my story, like hard stuff happens. I had to just pause for a moment and like reevaluate the things that are actually important to me. I think with that perspective, I was able to, now that perspective and a whole lot of privilege, man. Like I'm so fortunate because my role in my company is such that it's my job to just be present in the industry, to get to know people, to talk to folks, to write, to research, to think, and
Mhm.
take all of that and synthesize it down into something meaningful for our customers.
Yep.
So I'm really fortunate that though there's a little bit of alignment overlap in the things that I love, but I think it has made me sort of realize that the most important thing I can do is to connect with folks, and it's my kids, it's my partner, it's of course people in the industry, like friends that I've made through technology, like you and so many
Mhm.
others, and so I think it's like I don't know, that's sort of for me is like the story at least, and right now I'm focused on like the community side of things, just like really building really good, engaging community. And I want that to be a place where we give back to the larger community,
Yeah.
So I'm super excited about the sort of loose structure to that and, giving folks an opportunity to kind of grow in their ability to share those things and to articulate things and
Yes.
to have peers to have like real critique with and iron sharpens iron kind of conversations and challenging each other in that way. And honestly, it's just like celebrating, each other when we do something
Yeah.
great, like, I mean, there's, I don't know, there's so much there. So
That's amazing. You brought something up that I think I specifically wanted to talk with you about, and you just used the word sharing, which is something that I think that we know really intimately, but a lot of people don't, right? We who help create the web most intimately know the real power that comes with sharing and collaboration and community at this like very like kind of very large scale,
yeah, that's
potentially
right.
very large scale. Could you just talk about like what are your thoughts on like on sharing as it relates to your past, present, and future, but also like through
Mhm.
these lenses of values and community and just
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's so funny, like that. You're right. This space is unique. We're like, and we don't even see it. I think you're right. Like if you work on the web, it is just a part of your life.
Yeah, you
It's
take it
just
for granted.
you really do take it
100%.
for
Yeah.
granted. I remember sitting down. There was a Thai restaurant downtown here, and I remember meeting our lawyer there when we first got started. I don't know if you remember this, but we did this series of workshops called the Build Right workshops or something,
Yeah.
and the
I
Maker
still have the
series, and
t-shirt. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right, you do. Those were good shirts, but
They're really good shirts.
yeah. What was so funny is we sat down with him because we were like, hey, we need to like get a contract together because we were going to go do these workshops with these in these cities or whatever. And he was like, wait, hold on. This is our lawyer. He's like, you're telling me that the thing you're really uniquely positioned to do in the industry, you're going to just go teach other people how to do it? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, why would you do that? I'm like, you don't understand, you know. And then I just pulled up and open a browser, and I just went view source, and I was like, look, it's there. You can go see it. It's all there, you know. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay, you know. So I mean, that's the root of it, you know. And I think from the very beginning, at least for me, that has been like just something that I love. I love to teach. I love to collaborate. I love just the idea that you could sort of see something you've learned, give somebody else a little shortcut, you know, like a little bit. Oh my gosh, you know, that's great. It's funny because I was just, you know, when I talk with my team about this, like one of the things we've done for a long time at Sparkbox is that everybody writes. You know, we have a
Yeah.
blog, and a lot of companies, you know, they sort of like hire out writing. You know, they sub that out to something else. These days, AI is doing it for them. We've never really done that. It's always just been like, what did we learn in the last month? Write about that, you know? And I think that the number one piece of feedback I've gotten from folks is, I don't have anything to share, you know? And I'm like, okay, hold on, you know? And like it took me a while to sort of like reframe this, but my simple explanation to them is that I think about it like just literally like a link of chains. Yeah, there's somebody further along. There's definitely somebody smarter than you. There's somebody smarter than me. And there's somebody a little further behind. And it's actually really hard for those two to learn from each other. They need that piece in between. Like we have to sort of learn in progression. And that means everybody has a responsibility to be sharing the things they're learning. And so that's sort of my general perspective on it. And it takes away the imposter syndrome a little bit, because it's like, yeah, I'm not trying to impress, you know, whoever is a genius doing this in the industry for 50 years or whatever. I'm just trying to help the person who's a little bit further behind take the next step. You know, that's such a healthy perspective
Yep.
on it.
I love that metaphor of the links. Whenever we talk ourselves out of that, is it's like people are like, oh well, if those other links exist, well, those
Mm.
other people don't know that exists. And guess what?
Yeah.
There's this thing called a hyperlink that you can wire that thing up and then literally connect the links together.
Yes.
But it's like, sure, it's that, but it's also just it's human expression,
Yeah.
right? And that human expression can only come from that individual with their specific atoms, their specific life trajectory, their specific experience, their specific tone of voice, and so on. Again, we put ourselves into these boxes, or we like flatten this stuff into, it's like, oh well, what's the valuable key takeaway from this thing? And it's like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, the key takeaway can be helpful, but you could also just tell a story, and you can just tell
Yeah.
your story. And I can't believe we've been this far into the conversation and haven't talked about music yet.
Ah, yes.
Tell me about music as it relates to what we've been talking about, or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think, you know, for the early part of my life, it consumed me, you know, in my early days. And there was a time when I imagined I would just be a musician. I don't know if there's this choral group called Chanticleer. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like 12 male singers,
Okay.
but it is, you know, the full range, because they have men who can sing in these incredible falsettos, and they have the deepest, richest bass. And it is like nothing you've ever heard. And they go to these incredible, you know, venues, these cathedrals with the best sound, and they record just this music that like changes you from the inside out, you know?
Whoa.
And I was into that kind of music for a long time. I was in those groups. I was not that level of group, but in university settings and that kind of thing. So it was just like a part of, like, you know, every day for me. And then I kind of was learning a lot of other instruments at the same time, as I was so focused in, you know, in that space. And so these days, you know, I have a really nice little mid-century piano here around the corner that I play quite a bit. And then I've got my mandolin here, which I have been working on for a while now. It was fun to see Jeremy Keith rocking it out at Frostapalooza, Chris and all the other bluegrassers there, you know, so fun, you know. So I think it's like, for me now, you know, it's not that I ever see that I'll be some professional musician like I think I dreamed about when I was young. But
Yeah.
it is just it's sort of like it's right. My mandolin's right here because it's so easy to just like, I can turn my chair, I can step away from the screen for 15 minutes and it's like loosens things up in my brain,
Mm.
like it lets me, and there's something to this. I know other people have other ways of doing it. I was reading about this mathematician who he used to, he would lay down and sort of like half fall asleep, and that's when he would sort of be able to like work through the problems,
Yeah.
but it was like this weird sort of in between state. It was almost like a meditation but not sleep. I don't even know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's sort of what happens for me with music. It's like a little bit, it's consuming enough that I can't focus on the problem I was trying to solve, and it releases something else. The solutions I come up with there are much more sort of all like well-rounded or something, as
Yes.
opposed to focus, like just fix the thing. It's like a bigger, I don't know how to explain it.
I think that you're explaining it very well. And I bet that if you were to just like have an fMRI of your brain,
Yes.
like that would explain it perfectly.
Yeah, I'll bet it would. Yeah.
Yeah. You fell into music early and like specifically in this way that feels very spiritual, like
Mm,
right out of the
yeah.
gate, like it, like with that, this male choral group in the big cathedral, the output of that is such a soul level moving thing that you
Yeah.
seem to understand its power and gravity.
There's nothing like, I know this because I've seen it happen to you. But when you're playing in a band with a group of people who are all also in that sort of like zone, that groove, there
Mhm.
is something that happens where I don't even know how to express that feeling. It is such a unique experience. And like with a choral group, where it's a cappella and there's no instrumentation, I don't know. For me, like that was it, like almost like in like a purest form, where it was
Yeah.
just like we don't even have. It's just what we can create organically, and like hearing your voice in such beautiful collaboration with other voices, and I mean, it's like it literally is like it's unbelievable. I don't know how to explain that.
God.
Yeah, yeah,
That's you what? But it's
right.
a
The
but it is.
universe.
It is, yeah, it's I think that what it exposes is that it's like we are separate but not, right?
Yeah.
It is we are all one. We are actually like literally all like the same stuff.
Mm,
We happen to be moving around in these different biological bodies. But when you're able to connect and not just like, oh yeah, we had a good conversation, what you're describing is this like pure presence and synchronicity, and
yeah.
you are operating as one unit.
Yeah.
And there are different vehicles for that, right? Like people
Totally.
who describe like, just whatever, like team sports can like,
Yeah.
and like, militaries and like other things. Like there's these things wherever you're all fully present, you're
Mm,
aware that you are doing this activity totally concurrently with other people, and you're locked in and you're
yeah.
operating as one. That is such a potent reminder
Yeah.
of the deeper truth that is true for literally everything, for the
Yeah.
world, for the universe, for all of that, is like, and that's why music is so powerful. This is the beautiful thing. So it's like, as music creators, whether it's with your voice or through an instrument, you get that experience, that real sort of special experience that comes from, oh yeah, you're all locked in and you're producing something together.
Mm, yeah.
What's even cooler is that gets extended to just the people who are listening.
Yeah.
And whenever you are able to create true presence for the people producing and listening to
Yes.
the music, and you're all one,
Yeah.
it is all one entity. And sure, some people are doing it, some people aren't. Not everybody in the crowd is, somebody's checking their phone and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when you reach that like kind of critical mass where there's like a crowd of people and you're
Yeah.
all like actually present and listening,
Oh yeah.
it is one of the most powerful
Yeah.
things that I think people can experience.
Yeah. I'm sure you know Jacob Collier, right? The musician. This kid is unreal. I mean, clearly an amazing musician, but he does this thing where he gets you as an audience to participate. And he's got an album out where he's got like he's recorded voices from every continent, and he samples them and uses them in his records. And it's just such a unifying approach to music. I am like delighted every time I get to see him, and
Yeah.
and before him, Bobby McFerrin was doing
Yeah.
this wild
Yeah.
stuff with the audience. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's like a legacy there of like people who have somehow tuned into that,
Yep.
And you're right. It does connect you to something bigger. I'm reading, I'm super like, right now I'm reading a bunch of like philosophy stuff, just like weird. I don't know why, but I kind of got sent down this path. A friend of mine sent me a book. And anyway, I've been reading about the philosophy of consciousness and
Yes.
how like there's all these different ideas about what is it, 'cause nobody actually really knows, like,
Right.
and there's like a group of people who are like, yeah, it's just like you put the atoms in the right position and then there's enough processing in the brain that boom, consciousness emerges. And I'm just like, okay. And then there's this other idea of like, we are transducers, like we are a radio antenna, and consciousness is in the world and we just get a chance to tune into it. I love that as like the metaphor for me. I don't know if that's true or not, but those kinds of experiences make me feel like I'm tuning into something much bigger. That's part of it for me, I think.
That's beautiful. I like to think of what we're doing now is a bit like operating in the visible light spectrum, where it's like, okay, here's the colors of the rainbow and we see them and we know them to be true because we can see them, right? But we also know that all of these other waveforms exist, right? X-rays, gamma rays, and so on. When you pick at that stuff and you start talking about like energy, and you start talking about frequency, and things start talking about consciousness and all of that stuff, it gets into like weird territory pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But like I, as just whatever rational person, I like always come back as like, okay, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Like,
Right.
there's all this stuff, but we experientially feel connected to something. We feel connected to nature when we're walking in the woods or when we're hiking a mountain and we're like in the grandeur of nature. Like that's not pretend. Like it is something that we actually like experience, right? And again, music is the same thing. That chill that goes up your spine or whatever, or people, sitting in a pew in church. And again, like the music and the pipe organ and the these are real things. These are not like pipe dreams. These are actual phenomenon that happen in the world and in the universe. And I think that it's fascinating. And I don't know, like, if you pick at it deeply enough, that is like where it like kind of crosses over into like, you can put like a supernatural lens to that, but I don't even know if you need to. And that's where like the Carl Sagans of the world, I like why I've always like dig him, because it's like, I mean, sure, those are interesting questions that like, and we should pursue them, but also you don't necessarily need to have that like supernatural thing to just understand that it's like, we all came from the same stuff. You're able to look at the stars and just be totally blown away by just the vastness and amazing reality that we all inhabit.
Yeah. And it's only weird because we don't understand it, It's like, of course it's weird. Like everything that's new starts off weird until you understand it. So it's like, I used to be really like very sort of black and white. It's like, no, I don't believe any of that sort of like weird frou-frou stuff, whatever it is, woo woo. But that's not how I perceive it anymore. I think there's like an openness in me now, It's just
Yeah.
maybe my age or something. And it's not that I like believe everything I read or see, but I think I just am like okay with not knowing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a whole lot of things I know I will never fully understand, and that's actually okay for me, you know?
Yeah. I think that that's like a real sign of health and growth
Yeah.
wherever. Because I mean, and we kind of know this, like kind of like bringing this like back to earth a little bit, where like with every project or every client or every like thing or every experience, like when you go into something going, oh, I know how this is going to go, you always find yourself surprised, right? So it's like over time, you learn to say, yeah, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
is this the right call or is this not the right call? Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to learn more and we're going to have to like dig, so it's just like
Yeah.
we've kind of conditioned ourselves over a couple decades, I feel like, to more comfortable with being uncomfortable and not knowing the
Yeah.
answers. And I think that applies to many things in life, because I love it's kind of coming back to your values. It's like, so long as you keep the curiosity, for a fact that you're not going to pick at the nature of consciousness because you're a curious guy, that you're going to arrive at the answer
Yeah.
by the end of your life. Like,
Right.
that that's not going to happen.
That's
Right.
right.
And if you do, congratulations.
Yeah.
Music is so powerful to me because it forces presence.
Yeah.
When
Mm.
it is like a really amazing vehicle for creating that connection in a way that's more difficult to do just by like
Oh yeah.
pay attention right now or let's all think about the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
it really does
Yeah.
slam you in the face.
Yeah. There's a synchronicity that's required for that, whereas we talk about co-creation in our space, which is also, I think, a powerful way to connect with people, but it often happens asynchronously. And in music, it's much more, these days with tech, you can do some of that, but like, it's much more like in the moment, we have to do it together,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that. There's nothing
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, it really isn't. The only other structured question on the show is, what music would you like more people to know about?
Yeah. I mean, so the two that I mentioned so far, Chanticleer, I'll get you a link. It doesn't matter if you're a spiritual person or not, but if you listen to their recording of Bibel's Ave Maria, that will, oh my gosh, man. It is like, we talked about Jacob Collier. This kid is unreal. Like musically,
He really is.
I don't even know how to explain him. Like he can play every instrument. He can sing like mad. He's just got such a collaborative, creative spirit. And it adds like this other layer to his work. And it's just look him up on Instagram or something and find him. He's incredible.
Better yet, if you're able to see him live, like it's
yeah.
Because there's definitely stuff lost in translation. But when me and Ian and our sister went to go see him, and I've been like 4 rows back at a Radiohead concert, which was like,
so
the best concert I've ever been to. But I came away from that going like, I think that you can't obviously compare, but I was like, that was easily one of the best musical things I've ever seen in my entire life. That deeper level that we've been like sort of talking about, and brings everybody in and forces that presence. And it's just something else.
Well, it's so ironic that you mentioned Radiohead, because that's what I was actually going to suggest for my third. I am on a Radiohead revisit now. I've been going back through all the old records because I saw that they may be starting a tour again. And I'm like, if that's happening, I am finding a way, as I've never seen them live. And
oh my God,
gosh, dude. So that for sure.
So
if people are
have
not,
you been going chronologically? Like, have
no,
you been going?
I started where I kind of like was like, what are the records that I really, really love? I'm just going to start there. And then I've been making my kids listen. And which is super fun, like when we're cooking, we're going to listen to some Radiohead. And then I've just started, there's a few albums of theirs that I actually didn't even know existed, so like there's parts of the catalog for me that are just empty. So I'm just now starting to touch on some of those. So, oh my gosh, man. such good stuff. It's like, and I'm trying to figure out how do I play mandolin to this stuff, you know? It's like so fun to just figure out how to, and that's the cool thing about Radiohead. I feel like you could put any instrument in there. You really could. There's something universal about their music, you know?
Yeah. Any track, either like an old favorite or one from like some of the new things that you're like, ooh, I say that because I'm going to put a playlist together.
This is so interesting. I stumbled upon somebody who had written, like, they were like giving their assessment of the entire catalog, and they put every record in order in terms of their preference. And this was a bit of a music snob, and they were kind of like, some of the stuff that I love, they put so low, you know? And so I was kind of like, oh, so I feel like I love my two favorite records are The Bends and In Rainbows. I just feel like The Bends has just got there's like so much good energy in that. And then In Rainbows, put your headphones on and listen to the first track on In Rainbows, and it will like blow your mind. It's so good, you know? So I don't know. I can send you some others, but
Beautiful. Beautiful. No, that's fantastic. And hard agree. There's a lot there. I mean, it is hard to choose. And I feel like, the music snobby people come out in spades for a band like Radiohead. But
yes, for sure.
Well, cool. And then I think last thing is just like where can people find you? We're talking about like the Redwoods and all of that stuff. So
I'll give you the quick rundown. So bencallahan.com is where all of this stuff lives. So if you're looking for something specific, you can go there and get to it. But the sort of like three things I would point folks to. One is the questions, which is this just like open to the community. There's a list you can get on. And then on Mondays, I'll send a question. I get a co-host to come in. We come up with that question together. We analyze the data Wednesday night, and then Thursday or Friday, we dive into it. Every week's like a little mini research project, and it's super fun. It's an incredible group of people. So if you're just like curious about design systems or that space and you want to start meeting people in this community, that's an easy way to do it. If you want to go deeper in that same vein, Redwoods it's brand new. I just opened that this week, and there's a small cost associated with it, but it's really kind of just covers the tooling we use to stay connected throughout the week. But it is very collaborative. We are supporting each other. We're learning a ton. And the difference here is we're being really generous with our knowledge. Everything we learn, we're going to synthesize and offer it back in some way to the larger community. So if you want to be a part of creating, informing the industry in some ways, that's what that group is. And then the final thing I'll just say is my company, Sparkbox, we've been around 16, almost 17 years now. And it's so fun to come. We get to come into organizations, come alongside their teams, and just really help level them up. That's really what we do. And we do that. The side effect of that is like design systems or digital product design or all that stuff, but it's really about people. And that's what it's always been about for us. So those are probably the easiest ways to get me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome. Thank you very much. And congrats on your like launch of your whole community. That was like really cool. So
yeah. Thanks, Brad. I appreciate you having me, man.